Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm going to look at different electoral systems, in particular the ones used in the UK, and I'm going to try and answer the question which electoral system is best. And we're going to look at the different things that they give, and that some of them are strong in some ways and some of them are strong in others. Please also have a look at my A-Level Politics playlist, which has got loads and loads of videos on both UK and US politics, as well as a whole set of videos on political ideas. And if you're studying A-Level Politics, this playlist will give you pretty much all you'll need when it's finished. And I'm getting there. Right. What is used where? Well, we have first past the post used in UK general elections. We have single transferable vote, STV, which is used in the Northern Irish Assembly. We have supplementary vote, which is used to elect the Mayor of London. We have the additional members system, which is used in the Scottish and Welsh Parliaments. We have proportional representation, which has been used in European elections, which might immediately date this video because there might not be many more of those to come. Well, there might be no more of those to come, actually. If you want more detail on all the different electoral systems and exactly what they are and how they work, then this is not the best video for that. This is going to look at some of the pros and cons of them. But another video you should definitely go and have a look at is the video I've done, UK Politics, Different Electoral Systems Explained, and there's a link to it there, and you can see the thumbnail above, and there should be, if you're signed into YouTube, there should be a little eye appearing at the top, which will give you a link to that video. So, we're going to look at some different criteria for what would make the best electoral system. Now, one of the things that you often see in textbooks and articles and stuff written on this is an idea that an ideal, and this seems to very much be held as an ideal in Britain, is the idea of a single party government. Well, first past the post is most likely to give you a single party government. And people like single party government because it means that you have a clear winner, and then that party that wins has got the most votes, or will then have the opportunity to bring in the manifesto on which they ran the election, and everything should be fairly clear cut until you get round to another election. And it gives the idea of strong and stable government, though that phrase has lost a lot of its flash after being used a little bit too much by May when she was in power. So first past the post is the most likely to give it. In 2019, we've seen a return to the norm in this. The UK general election in 2019, the Conservative Party have gained a strong majority of 80. Again, we'll talk about how representative that is in some future parts of the video, but we have got strong single party government. However, first past the post doesn't guarantee this. It always used to be said it guaranteed it. But the elections of 2010 and 2017, where there was no majority and there was needed a coalition between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems in 2010, and a special arrangement between the Conservatives with the DUP in 2017, were needed to get things through Parliament and for government to function. So this kind of absolute claim that was always made by first past the post over any more proportional systems always was that we will give you strong, stable government. Doesn't stand up quite as much as it does, and the idea that no other system can give it to you again doesn't really stand up. AMS can produce single party government. It did in Scotland in 2011. SDV is very unlikely to ever give you single party government, and largely it's devised to prevent it, actually. And this is kind of the case in Northern Ireland, because you're not going to have a happy population in the in one side or other of the divide in the community between if you had so for example, if a unionist party is the single party in government, then the nationalist community is not going to be very happy. So it's kind of devised actually in Northern Ireland to avoid it. Now, one thing I would ask on all of this is do you really want single party government? Is that actually desirable? We see plenty of political systems around the world that are kind of devised to try and prevent it, actually. The argument I would give on that is it gives too much power into the hands of one party, and that party may not have received 50% of the vote. So again, look at 2019, and we got a Conservative majority of 80. They got 43.6% of the vote. Strong majority, 43.6% of the vote. Again, to me, that doesn't quite add up. Now, another thing that you'll have studied will have been the idea of parliamentary sovereignty. So if we're electing the parties into the House of Commons, and then the House of Commons is supreme over the House of Lords, and Parliament is supreme over everything, then there is an argument. You end up with what's known as an elected dictatorship, where essentially you end up with, for example, what we have now. We have a government with a majority of 80, and they pretty much can do what they like, and unless they have a huge internal split, they can do pretty much what they like, or what their party leaders decide they should do, all the way through until the next election, which will probably be in 2024. Now, coalition government leads to compromise. It leads to parties having to work together. Now, we do see problems with that in Northern Ireland. We've seen the power sharing arrangements collapse. But again, one thing that would be interesting to think about is, well, what did you make of that coalition government in the UK 2010 to 2015? Was that an absolute disaster? I mean, it functioned. I mean, it lasted for the full 5 years, which is more than the Conservative government did that was elected in 2015, and was more than the Conservative government did that was elected in 2017, neither of which lasted more than a couple of years. So again, it's an interesting idea. Is single party government something you really want? If you really, really want single party government, then first past the post is probably best. If you don't, it isn't. So in terms of party representation, well, first past the post upholds the two-party system, even when voting might suggest that a country like the UK doesn't necessarily have a two-party system. If you like two-party systems, again, first past the post is for you. And if you like that idea of clear choice between two competing parties, and our whole parliamentary system is kind of set up for that, you have two sets of benches facing each other for a starting point. The Lib Dems, UKIP, Greens, SNP have all had notable votes in the UK over recent elections, but Parliament continues to be dominated by the Conservative and Labour parties. So is the party representation in this fair? Well, in 2015, the Conservatives won with only 38% of the vote, falling short of the 50% of seats, but only just. In 2019, they won 43.6% of the vote and got a majority of 80. So the parties are not being fairly represented. Now, probably the worst example of this is UKIP in 2015, where they won one seat. So that's 1 out of 650 seats. They won 13% of the vote. So if the Parliament had been proportional, they would have won 85 seats. So that's 84 seats they've lost based on the voting system. The Lib Dems, who are one of the big parties who push for reform of electoral systems, I would argue that they maybe not to that incredible extreme, but in very, very significant numbers, they have been continuously underrepresented in Parliament. And although they got their time in coalition 2010 to 2015, they actually should have been holding the balance of power in most elections going back the previous 20 years. Now, it's not only the big two parties that get disproportionately well represented. So the SNP won 95% of the seats in Scotland in 2015, and they did this with about 50% of the vote. So again, we're seeing some parties are getting massively overrepresented and some parties are getting massively underrepresented, and so that seems to suggest that first past the post is not the best system, and that you would get fairer distribution of and party representation based on the other system. So AMS, STV are going to give you a more proportionate balance between the parties. Now, the most extreme and the best example of giving that representative thing is PR. One of the arguments always used against PR is the idea that it gives extreme parties a foothold in power. Now, I will use the example here of the BNP winning 2 seats in the European elections in 2009. Now, these things can be dealt with by a threshold level. For example, the London Assembly uses a 5% threshold to avoid the issues of minor parties picking up seats. Now, one of the ones as a history teacher that I often seen kind of trotted out on proportional representation is the idea of it allowed the Nazis in Germany. It didn't let the Nazis in Germany. It was 40% of the German population voting for them that let them in Germany. So there were coalition governments, and the Nazis did form parts of coalition governments. But if we look at the examples above, if it had been first past the post, they might well have held a majority. So this kind of links back to our previous part of the video, and it depends whether you like single party government or not. Again, if you want single party government and you like two-party systems, then first past the post is still winning. If you don't like either of those things, and you like the idea of coalitions and you like the idea of a fair representation of parties, then you want to look at one of the more proportional systems, either PR itself or single transferable vote, or you want to look at AMS. So voter choice. Well, STV and AMS are both more proportional than first past the post, and they also mean that there's a wider range of parties that get seats, and people's votes therefore are more likely to make a difference when they vote for one of these smaller parties. So you kind of get a bit of a chicken and egg thing with first past the post, that where they go, well, people don't vote for in large numbers for small parties. Well, there's no point voting for small parties in first past the post. Whilst as soon as you start changing the system, there's more point voting for a small party. They're not always proportional, and this was illustrated in the Welsh elections in 2016, where the Labour did so well on the constituency vote that it couldn't be it can be mitigated by shifting around in terms of the regional lists. Many voters do not use their second vote in SV, and this was shown in mayoral elections. Now, AMS allows split ticket voting, and this is when you could vote for the party that you think is got a chance of winning that you quite like on the constituency list, and then you could vote for the party that you really like, but they aren't going to win a constituency on the regional list. So, for example, the Greens tend to do very well on that, because they go, well, you're not going to win the constituency I'm in, but I do want to vote Green representation, and people vote for the Greens on the regional lists. And split ticket voting is something that is, for example, is just normal in America, though, where people will split their ticket in terms of who they vote in the presidential election and who they vote for in a congressional election. And again, if these systems get used more, then this could be something that became adapted in the UK. Now, there is an argument that although you've got the voter choice, the choice is confusing, and this can have an impact on the voters' ability to make a rational choice, or to actually have their vote counted. I mean, the most extreme example of this was in Scotland, where these things were fairly new, in 2007, and we've got 146,000 ballots that were incorrectly completed. There's quite interesting statistics here in terms of what it means in numbers. First of all, in terms of the number of electoral parties, this is the mean average of how many parties are competing. So first past the post, we're looking at about 3.4. STV, we're looking at 5.2, and then AMS, the two numbers there, one for Scotland, one for Wales, so 4.4 in Scotland, 4.5 in Wales. So we can see that you have literally more choice under STV and AMS than you do under first past the post in UK elections. And the impact in this in parliaments is very marked as well. So first past the post produces an average of 2 parties, whilst STV produces an average of 4.5 parties, whilst AMS in Scotland and Wales produces either 3.3 in Scotland or 3.1 in Wales. So in terms of voter choice, then you would definitely steer away from first past the post, and you would look at either STV or AMS. Now, another important bit we're told that people are interested in when it comes to an electoral system is the link between the voter and the representative. In first past the post, there is a very, very clear link between the constituency and therefore the constituents and the MP. They win that constituency, they represent that constituency. In AMS, then the constituency link is there for some who win the constituencies, but not for others who win in the regional lists. STV, there are multi-member constituencies, so there is a weaker connection in theory between the people and their representatives. I mean, it's complicated in Northern Ireland. People would tend to look to in the multi-member constituency to the representative from their community, and therefore you could say that this kind of works out. Now, first past the post looks much the best on this, but it will depend on the individual MP, and especially given that they're quite likely to have won with less than 50% of the vote. So it's how many of their constituencies are happy going for help or being represented by someone for a party they voted against. The media also increasingly concentrates on party leaders, and that's what you see in the news and in the newspapers and everything else. And therefore you have a lot of people who essentially vote on party and party leader rather than actually ever really having much of a clue of who their MP is. Having said that, there are lots and lots of MPs who do really, really good constituency work and are all embracing in terms of representing the ideas and the complaints of people, whether they voted for them or not. So is it time to scrap first past the post? Well, on one side, well, yes, it's disproportional. It favours particular parties, either these that are large, like the Conservative Party, or regionally concentrated, like the SNP. It limits voter choice, and we can see that quite clearly what we looked at in the video. You would have more choice if you had STV or AMS. Votes are not of equal value, and I think this is a really, really key point. So if you are voting in a safe seat, then your vote has very little impact, and you often have thousands and thousands of wasted votes, not only wasted on opposition parties, but more in particular wasted on the party that wins, because they've just won by absolutely miles. And it doesn't matter if you win a seat by one vote or if you win it by 30,000 votes, you still only get the one seat. And the other bit, and this is an issue that could be sorted without necessarily sorting the entire electoral system, is that constituencies vary quite remarkably in size. So the constituencies in the UK are normally about 75,000, but we've got them that are over 100,000 and we've got some that are down under 30. And so that gap is just too big. And again, with that, what that means is not every vote matters the same. And we start to see very disillusionment with the voting system, because if people live in safe seats, their vote has really little impact, and therefore we see higher voter turnout in marginal seats where votes actually make a difference. We've also seen things like tactical voting emerge because of this. Now, first past the post, one of its big claims was that it produced strong majority government. Well, 2010, 2015, 2017 would all suggest that's not the case. 2019, then the first past the post fans can be going, look, we told you it worked and it's all fine. And then we've got my other worry that actually, yes, you get strong single party government, but with everything else with our political system, you end up with this idea of an elected dictatorship where essentially you've got people in power for 4 or 5 years. You can do whatever they like, and there's very little political mechanism to stop them. And this is a bit of a worry if they aren't genuine. They can't genuinely claim to have the support of the majority of the people. Now, the argument for not scrapping it is still our best chance of producing strong single party government. So if you still think that's a great idea, then first past the post is there. One of the best strengths of it is this link between MP and constituents. But again, there are some circumstances where that doesn't work, but it is definitely going to give a stronger link than the other systems. And it doesn't lead to this complication that you get with AMS, where some of the representatives have got a constituency link and some of them haven't. I don't know whether this would maybe work out in terms of the kind of jobs that you then gave to the different types of representative within your parliament. So, for example, it might actually be quite a good idea if people with ministerial responsibilities didn't have constituency responsibilities as well. Other systems have produced lower voter turnout. So if you look at the stats, it looks like first past the post is the one that gets people out and voting, which kind of goes against some of the stuff I've said. And what I would say the reason why it does go against some of the stuff I said is because the UK general election is the big one. That's the one which makes the biggest difference to everybody. That's the most important election as people see it. And therefore it gets a higher voter turnout. Now, if you use one of the different voting systems for the general election, then that voting system would have the highest voter turnout. If you use first past the post in some of the other ones, then I don't think the voter turnout would go up in Scottish elections or Welsh Assembly election, Welsh Parliament elections if we changed it to first past the post. There is, however, a definite lack of public support for change, and we saw this in the 2011 referendum when the idea of moving to electoral reform was A, strongly rejected, and B, not a lot of people voted in it. And first past the post is probably the simplest to understand electoral system. And again, so if you're looking for simplicity, that would suggest this is the way to go. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that's given you some food for thought, whether you agree with me or not on some of the stuff that I've been saying. And again, either way, please leave your thoughts in the comment section. If you found it useful, please hit the like. And if you want more videos and notifications when they arrive to help you with A-level politics, or if you're also interested in lots of history, there's lots and lots of history videos on here as well, then please subscribe, support the channel, and get notifications as we add more and more content. Thank you very much for watching.